In 4th July 2016, human rights activists and Kenya's entire legal fraternity were shaken by the murders of the 32-year-old human rights lawyer, Willie Kimani, his client, a boda operator, Ksh50 Mwenda, and their trusted taxi driver, Joseph Mwiruri. Their deaths came shortly after they were kidnapped, murdered, and dumped by the rogue police officers right after attending a court session at the Mavoko Law Courts. Weeks later, their bodies were fished out of the river in Oldonyo Sabuk, a popular river where bodies of people believed to have been murdered have always been found. So, who were the rogue police officers who committed these gruesome murders? Welcome to Dark Doors, where we post solved, unsolved, and strange cases happening to Kenyans in Kenya and beyond. If you appreciate our true crime storytelling, support our channel by liking this video, subscribing to this channel to stay updated on our latest videos. This is the story of Willie Kimani and how his passion to get justice costed his life. On 10th April 2015, Ksh50 Mwenda was riding a motorcycle as a pillion passenger, and when they got near the Syokimau chief camp, they were stopped by plainclothes police officers from Syokimau police station. Allegedly, they were demanding 50 Kenya shillings bribe for operator protection charge, and since Mwenda did not have, he tried evading the police officers out of fear of being arrested when he was shot in the arm by one of the officers, namely Senior Sergeant Frederick Leriman. Worried of his actions, Leriman took Mwenda to Shalom Hospital in Mlolongo for first aid, and thereafter he placed him in police custody. 3 days later, a seriously injured Mwenda was charged at Mavoko Law Courts with 3 criminal counts, including drug possession, gambling in public place, and resisting arrest by a police officer. Mwenda was aggrieved by this turn of events, and since he was badly injured and unable to work, he decided to pursue this case with a private lawyer. Later, he sought help from the International Justice Mission, IJM, an NGO that helps vulnerable people get justice. Mwenda's case then landed on lawyer Willie Kimani, who began to investigate the case on behalf of International Justice Mission. As the investigations continued, IJM realized that Ksh50 was innocent and that the demand was continuously harassing Ksh50, and so IJM helped him report this case to IPOA, Independent Policing Oversight Authority, an independent body that investigates police misconduct and abuse of power. On 25th June 2015, Mwenda reported the shooting and the false accusations that was put to him by the demand, and IPOA commenced the investigations into Leriman's conduct. In between the investigations, IPOA called Leriman for questioning. This angered Leriman, and he felt that his job was now on the line, and so Leriman began new efforts of harassing Mwenda so that he could withdraw the complaints as evidence of the events that happened on December 13, 2015, when Leriman, in the company of other police officers, picked up Ksh50 from his home. He was taken to Mlolongo police station. The next day, he was charged with 6 counts of traffic violations that allegedly he committed while riding a motorcycle. This was despite the fact that Joseph had a gunshot injury to his hand and was unable to ride a motorcycle. He again reported this matter to IPOA, and this did not stop Leriman from harassing Ksh50 Mwenda. On 16 February 2016, Mwenda was again picked up by 2 men outside a supermarket, claiming to be officers from the Criminal Investigating Department. The officers alleged that they were investigating a violent robbery case and that Ksh50 was one of the suspects. Mwenda, in his determination, presented this subsequent arraignment before court investigated by IPOA. This made IPOA, IJM, and Witness Protection Agency seek help to protect Ksh50, as it was evident that his life was in danger, and Ksh50, together with his family, were relocated to an undisclosed place. He would only be visited by Willie and their trusted taxi driver, Joseph, to take him to and from the court. This move made it hard for Leriman to access Ksh50, and so he resorted to an extreme measure, and that was murder. To set this plot perfectly, Leriman sought help from other rogue police officers, including his boss, Corporal Stephen Cheburet, Sergeant Leonard Mwangi, his close friend, Sergeant Kamejo, who is still at large, and a police informer, one Paul Ngugi. Stephen Cheburet introduced Ngugi to Frederick Leriman. Goge was a boda operator who was recruited to be a police informant, and he used to work closely with Corporal Stephen Cheburet earlier on at Kabete police station. And so, Leliman requested a meeting with Goge at Connections Bar in Mlolongo. He told Goge that he needed to silence Josephat Mwenda since he was really pushing for his dismissal, and that he was closely assisted by IPOA and IJM. On June 22nd, a day before Mwenda's case, Peter Ngoge and Frederick Leliman met again at Mlolongo Police Canteen, where they found up the murder plot. Goge was tasked to spy Mwenda's movement, while Leliman and his team identified a perfect spot to execute Mwenda. And to keep communicating anonymously, Leliman registered 2 SIM cards using a random lost ID, gave one to Goge, and he remained with one. On June 23, 2016, the execution day, at around 9 a.m., Joseph Muiruri, the trusted taxi driver, drove Mwenda and his lawyer Willie Kimani to Mavoko Law Courts. The court session lasted for about 2 hours and adjourned. All this time, Goge was seated outside the courts, closely monitoring Mwenda. He notified Leliman about Mwenda and his lawyer Willie Kimani's movement. The two boarded their taxi, which was driven by Joseph Muiruri, and they drove toward the city center from Mlolongo. The trio, Mwenda, Willie Kimani, and Josephat, were stopped by plainclothes officers and told they were under arrest. Sensing no fear, they alighted their taxi and entered in Leliman's vehicle, which was being driven by Sergeant Kamenju. Present in the vehicle was a close friend and a colleague to Leliman, one Leonard Mwangi. They were then abducted and ferried to a container somewhere in Syokimau AP post. Leliman instructed Goge to take possession of Muiruri's taxi and dispose it somewhere in Meru. Meanwhile, Leliman was examining Muiruri, and he noticed that Muiruri's taxi was well known around Zimmerman, and so driving along that route would be risky. He informed Goge, who drove it to Limuru and dumped it at Kwambira Forest. In the vehicle were Muiruri, Mwenda, and Willie's phone. He switched off all the phones before disposing them. Meanwhile, Willie Kimani, Josephat Mwenda, and Joseph Muiruri were locked up in a container which had been converted into a holding cell from midday until nightfall, without food or water. Syokimau police officers on duty that day, Corporal Stephen Cheburet and Sylvia Wajiko, failed to record their names on the occurrence book, confirming that the purpose of this arrest was a sinister. Leliman and his ally, one Leonard Mwangi, left the station and went to a pub in Mlolongo to have drinks before Ngoge joining them later after disposing Muiruri's car. At this point, Willie, Josephat, and Joseph were sensing danger. Willie noticed that he had a pen in his pocket, and being a fast thinker, he took the pen and a piece of tissue paper and scribbled a message. He then tied it to an electric socket holder that was in the room and beckoned a motorbike rider who was passing along the way. The rider approached and jumped off his bike to pick up the socket. Willie, almost in a whisper, told the rider, "Please call this person. It's urgent. Tell her to come now, as we are in danger." On the note was Josephat Mwenda's wife's number, Rebecca, and the emergency message. Unfortunately, one of the officers at the Syokimau police post noticed this, and he immediately called Leliman. He informed him that Kimani had tried to reach out to his wife. At this time, Leliman, Mwangi, and Goge were still at Connections Bar having drinks. He panicked, and they immediately left the bar to Syokimau police cells, where the trio had been locked up. While on the way, Leliman called Sergeant Kamenjo, instructing him to bring his car, as it would be useful in transporting Willie, Josephat, and Joseph. At the station, Leliman handcuffed the three and bundled them into the boot of his car, together with his accomplices, Peter Ngoge, Sergeant Kamenjo, and Officer Leonard Mwangi. They then drove to an open field along Mombasa Road, where they would kill Willie, Joseph, and Josephat. Meanwhile, the motorbike rider tried reaching Mwenda's wife Rebecca, but was in vain. Later on, Rebecca called the strange number, and the rider passed the information. This was the evidence that would help trace Willie, Joseph, and Josphat's killer. Unable to help, Rebecca called one of the IJM team members and passed the message. The IJM took it upon themselves to rush to Syokimau police post, but it was too late. Willie, Joseph and Josephat had been taken out. At the scene of crime, each of them was allocated a task. Goge would hand the victims over to Leonard Mwangi, who would then lead them to where Leliman and Kamenjo would execute them. It was later revealed that before they would execute them, the four, Goge, Leliman, Kamenjo and Mwangi, spent about 3 hours discussing on whether to kill the victims or not. It is said that Goge and Mwangi were of the opinion that the men should be spared, but Leliman and Kamenjo wanted them dead, and since Leliman was the mastermind, his opinion was upheld, and at around 11 p.m., the four men commenced their duties to execute them. At around 11 p.m., Mwenda, the first man to be killed, was tortured before being killed by strangulation using a rope with a polythene bag over his head. His body was touched in a gunny bag and then thrown into Leliman's car boot. Joseph Moirori, the taxi driver, was the second one. He was strangled using another polythene bag over his head, and his body was also starched in a gunny bag and thrown into Kamenjo's car boot. Willie Kimani, the lawyer, was the last person to be killed. He was tortured and also strangled just like Mwenda and Moirori, and starched in a gunny bag, then thrown into Leliman's car boot where Mwenda's body was. The two cars then proceeded to Athi River in Oldonyo Sabuk, where they dumped the bodies before going back to the bar in Mlolongo, where they ate and drank before going their ways. All this time, Willie, Joseph and Josephat had been reported as missing persons, and the legal fraternity, together with IJM, were actively looking for them. The long, tedious search continued, and after 1 week, that was on 30th June 2016, 2 bodies were found floating in River Athi by residents. That was 100 kilometers away from the point of abduction, and the other one was found on 1st July 2016. The autopsies of the bodies revealed that they all died out of being hit with a blunt object, injuries in the head, chest and neck, and strangulation marks around the neck. The investigations of who killed the Mavoko 3 started immediately, and since they were last seen at Syokimau police post, the 3 officers, that is Sylvia Njoki, Stephen Cheburet, and Frederick Leliman, duty officers on the day Willie, Joseph and Josephat disappeared, were arrested. The investigators continued extracting data from their phones when they realized that Leliman's police phone radio was seen in all crime scenes that were under investigations. Leliman claimed that he was not on duty the very day of execution, which meant that if he was off duty, then Mwangi was the one who was supposed to be with the phone. This information made Mwangi a person of interest, and he was arrested. The phone radio signaled all the movements they made during the night, and that's how police discovered open field in Soweto area along Mombasa Road, the scene of murder. Upon interviewing the residents, they confirmed that a vehicle had been spotted parked in the bush, giving the police officers a clue that it might be the actual place where the execution took place. At this place, the investigating police found empty energy drink cans, cigarette filters, and paper bags, which were all taken for testing to check if any DNA traces matched the suspects or the victims. Surprisingly, they all matched Goge's DNA. Goge was then tracked down, and on August 8, 2016, he was arrested. He later turned into prosecution witness, and he said all that he knew concerning the murders. In his confession, he confirmed that Leliman was the mastermind, and he continued to name other persons who were involved in this heinous act. The trial began in 2016, and the prosecution presented 46 witnesses and over 100 exhibits. This made the prosecution put a very strong case on how Leliman, Cheburet, Mwangi, Sylvia and Goge participated in the abduction and killing of Willie Kimani, his client Josephat Mwenda, and their driver Joseph Moirori on 23 June 2016. Among the witnesses were residents who discovered the bodies floating in River Athi, Kimani's former colleagues, and the boda rider who had picked the emergency note. The strongest evidence that the prosecution used against the 5 was Goge's chilling confession that left the prosecution with no option but to convict them. This case dragged for years. However, 6.5 years later, a judgment day was set, and that was on February 3, 2023. Justice Jesse Receipt found Peter Ngugi, Sylvia Wanjiku, Stephen Cheburet, and Frederick Releiman guilty of murdering lawyer Willie Kimani, his client Josephat Mwenda, and taxi driver Joseph Mwiruri. Mwangi was accused of all 3 counts of murder. Frederick Releiman, being the mastermind, was sentenced to death for the murder of the Mavoko 3 after the prosecution established that he had planned and executed the murder through impunity and abuse of power. For Sylvia Wanjiku, the only mistake she did was failing to record in the camp's occurrence book that the 3 had been detained in the container. This made her culpable in their disappearance and death, and thus giving her 24 years in jail. Stephen Cheburet helped Releiman throughout the whole process. However, he played a very critical role in the abduction and holding the deceased person in his police post where he was a senior officer on duty that day. He was given 30 years behind bars. Peter Ngugi was handed 20 years in jail. He had confessed to the police, and his confession shaped the entire investigation. What do you think of these jail terms? Was justice served? Please let us know in the comment section. And that brings us to the end of Willie Kimani's story. Thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate you. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll be seeing you guys in the next video. Bye bye.